I sacrificed a decade of my life to pay off my parents' $700,000 mortgage, ensuring their retirement. But when Mom announced the house was now a graduation gift for my brother and banned me from the party, I didn't cry. I just asked my lawyer uncle one question that destroyed their entire scheme. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The room was spinning before I even picked up the phone. I was lying on my bathroom floor, the cool tiles pressing against my flushed cheek, waiting for the nausea of another migraine to pass. My doctor had called it extreme adrenal fatigue. I called it the price of doing business. For the last 5 years, I had worked 80-hour weeks as a high-stakes forensic accountant, hunting down hidden assets for divorce settlements and corporate fraud cases. I had ruined my health to secure my family's future. When my phone buzzed on the bath mat, the screen flashing Mom, I hesitated. My head was throbbing with a pulse that felt like a hammer hitting an anvil, but I answered. I always answered. "Amelia, are you there?" Patricia's voice was shrill, vibrating with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "I'm here, Mom," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut against the harsh overhead light. "Just feeling a bit under the weather. The doctor said I need rest." "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Amelia. You're always tired." She dismissed me instantly, her tone shifting from annoyance back to that manic joy. "Anyway, listen, we have the most incredible news. Harvey is coming home this weekend for the graduation party, and your father and I have finally decided on his present." I shifted, trying to sit up, fighting the wave of dizziness. "That's nice, Mom. A watch, a trip." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, pregnant silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Better, we're giving him the house." I froze. The migraine vanished for a split second, replaced by a cold, hollow shock. "I'm sorry, the connection must be bad. It sounded like you said you're giving him the house." "We are," she squealed. "The mortgage is gone, thanks to that lovely contribution you made last year, so the house is free and clear. It's a clean asset. Harvey needs a head start. He's going to be a big businessman, Amelia. He can't be renting. So we're signing the deed over to him on Sunday at the party. It's his legacy." My breath hitched. "Mom, that wasn't a contribution. I paid off $700,000. That is every cent I have earned since I was 22. We agreed that was my equity for your retirement." "Don't be selfish," Patricia snapped, her voice hardening instantly. "You have your career, you have your little apartment in the city. Harvey has nothing. He's the baby. He needs this foundation. Besides, it's family money. It stays in the family." Before I could respond, I heard a scuffling noise, and then Harvey's voice came on the line. Smooth, arrogant, and utterly devoid of gratitude. "Hey, sis," he drawled. "Look, Mom told me you might get weird about this. I just want to set some boundaries before I take ownership. I'm turning the guest wing, your old room, into my home office. So, you'll need to clear your boxes out by Friday." "Harvey," I said, my voice trembling, "that is my house. I paid for the roof over your head." "It's Mom and Dad's house," he corrected smugly. "And on Sunday, it's mine. Speaking of Sunday, look, this party is for my friends and people who actually support my success. Mom thinks you'll just bring a negative vibe because you're jealous. So, don't come. Seriously, I don't want you there." "You're uninviting me from a party at the house I paid for." "The house I own," he corrected. "Bye, Amelia, get some sleep, you sound terrible." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence of my empty apartment deafening. The physical pain in my head was nothing compared to the jagged, tearing sensation in my chest. I had destroyed my body to save them from bankruptcy, and they had just stepped over my prone form to hand the prize to the golden child. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I didn't move from the bathroom floor for an hour. I couldn't. It wasn't just the shock. It was the sheer mathematical impossibility of what I had just heard. My brain, trained to track convoluted money trails and expose elaborate lies, was trying to reconcile the emotional data with the financial reality. They are giving him the house. I dragged myself up and walked to the living room, my legs feeling like lead. I poured a glass of water, my hands shaking so badly I spilled half of it on the counter. I looked out the window at the gray city skyline. I lived in a modest one-bedroom rental. I drove a 6-year-old sedan. I bought my clothes from Disco. NT racks. Why? Because every month for a decade, I had sent a check for $4,500 to the bank to cover my parents' adjustable-rate mortgage that they had foolishly refinanced to fund Harvey's private schooling and lifestyle. And then, last year, the lump sum, the big check. The payout from the biggest case of my career, a massive corporate embezzlement scandal I had cracked wide open. The bonus had been substantial. I could have bought a penthouse. I could have traveled the world. Instead, I wired $280,000 to clear the balance of the family estate because Patricia had cried about being afraid of losing the home in her old age. I sat down at my small, cluttered desk and opened my laptop. My screensaver was a picture of the three of them, Mom, Dad, and Harvey, on a vacation I had paid for but couldn't attend because I was working. I needed to hear it again. I needed to be sure. I called the house landline this time. Patricia answered on the second ring, sounding breathless. Amelia, I hope you're calling to apologize for upsetting your brother. He's very stressed about the move-in logistics. I'm not apologizing, Mom, I said, my voice deadly calm, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I just need to understand. You are transferring the title. Does Dad agree with this? Your father wants what's best for Harvey, she said dismissively. Harvey is going to do great things. He just needs a debt-free start. You're established, Amelia. You're fine. Why are you always so greedy? You keep counting pennies while we're trying to build a future for your brother. Greedy? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. I paid the debt, Mom. It's not counting pennies when it's $750,000. It was a gift, she shrieked. Children help their parents. That's how it works. You don't give a gift and then hold it over our heads like a lone shark. You're just like those awful people you investigate. Cold, heartless. I see, I said softly. So, Sunday is the official announcement. Yes, we're signing the transfer papers with Uncle Robert at the party. A ceremonial signing. It's going to be beautiful. And no, nothing has changed. You are still not welcome if you're going to have this attitude. Uncle Robert is doing the paperwork, I asked, a strange sensation washing over me, a mix of adrenaline and ice. Of course, he's the family attorney. He's handling the transfer to Harvey. I looked at the file cabinet next to my desk. The bottom drawer was locked. Inside was a fireproof safe. Okay, Mom, I said. If Uncle Robert is handling it, then I'm sure everything will be legally sound. Exactly, she huffed. Now stop bothering us. We have caterers to coordinate. She hung up again. I set the phone down and stared at the locked cabinet. A slow, dark realization began to form. Patricia thought she was the puppet master. She thought because she was my mother, her word was law. She thought money was just magic that appeared when she cried and vanished into Harvey's pockets when she smiled. She assumed that because I was her daughter, I had handed over that money with a hug and a kiss and a blind trust. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They weren't dealing with just a daughter anymore. They were dealing with a woman who hunted liars for a living, and I never, ever moved money without a paper trail. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand the history. I wasn't just a dutiful daughter, I was the family's life support system. My father was a passive man, a go-along-to-get-along type who let Patricia steer the ship, even as she steered it directly into icebergs. Patricia was a retired school administrator who cared more about appearances than solvency. And Harvey was the masterpiece she had been painting for 23 years. When Harvey was in high school, he needed the newest gaming consoles, the brand name sneakers, the car. He needs to fit in, Amelia, Mom would say. You understand, don't you? You're so smart you can get a scholarship. Harvey needs help. So I worked. I worked through high school. I worked 3 jobs in college. I ate instant noodles while Harvey posted pictures of bottle service at clubs on my parents' credit card. When I graduated and landed my junior auditor role, I didn't buy a car. I took over their mortgage payments because the bank was threatening foreclosure. I remembered the night I told them I would pay it. Patricia had cried, hugging me, telling me I was the savior of this family. She had promised that the house was our legacy, that it would always be my home too. That memory soured in my mouth as I thought about Harvey now. I decided to do a little reconnaissance. I couldn't go to the house, but I could see what was happening. I logged onto social media, using a burner account I kept for investigations, and pulled up Harvey's profile. He had already posted a story. It was a video of him walking through my parents' living room, the living room with the hardwood floors I had paid to refinish. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, a glass of scotch in his hand. "Big things coming, guys," he said to the camera, winking. "Official homeowner status unlocking this Sunday. The manor is secured. Time to gut this old kitchen and make a real bachelor pad. Watch this space." He panned the camera to the kitchen, where Patricia was visible in the background, beaming at him with adoration. She looked younger, lighter. The burden of debt was gone, lifted from her shoulders by my sweat and blood, and she was using that new energy to worship him. Then the camera swung to the dining table. There were blueprints laid out. I zoomed in on the freeze frame. They weren't just cosmetic changes. He was planning to knock down the wall to the guest wing, my room. The room where I had studied for the CPA exam until my eyes bled. He was going to erase me completely. And the caption on the video read, "Self-made, grindset new money." Self-made, I whispered to the empty air of my apartment. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a level of delusion that bordered on pathology. But the real villain wasn't Harvey. He was just a spoiled child playing dress-up. The real villain was Patricia. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the exact dollar figure of my sacrifice. She simply didn't care. To her, I was a resource to be mined, and Harvey was the jewel to be polished. I looked at the calendar. It was Thursday. The party was Sunday. I needed to talk to Uncle Robert. Patricia said he was handling the paperwork. Uncle Robert was my father's brother, a man who had always been kind to me, though quiet. He was a decent small-town lawyer, mostly wills and estates. If Patricia had told him I gifted the money, he might be operating under false pretenses. Or worse, maybe he was in on it. Maybe the whole family had decided to cut out the cash cow now that the milk had been delivered. I felt that familiar sharp focus snapping into place. The nausea was gone. The fatigue was pushed into a box in the back of my mind. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a transaction. And in my world, when someone tries to steal a 7-figure asset, you don't get sad. You get evidence. I reached for my keys. I wasn't going to the house. I was going to my office to print a very specific document from the archives. I didn't go home to cry. I drove straight to the financial district. The office building was nearly empty at this hour, a silent monolith of glass and steel that felt more like home than the house I had grown up in ever did. The security guard, Ralph, gave me a tired wave as I badged in. He didn't ask why I was there at 9:00 p.m. on a Thursday. In my line of work, the hours were dictated by the discovery of evidence, not the setting of the sun. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, the hum of the lift the only sound in the world. My mind was racing, replaying Patricia's shrill joy and Harvey's smug dismissal. The house I own. When I walked into my office, I didn't turn on the main lights. I worked by the glow of the city outside and the green lamp on my desk. I walked over to the large, steel-reinforced filing cabinet in the corner, the one reserved for my personal archives. I spun the combination lock, left to 15, right to 28, left to 4. The mechanism clicked with a satisfying heavy thud. I pulled out a thick, expandable folder labeled Estate P&H. I sat down and spread the documents across my mahogany desk. This was the paper trail Patricia had conveniently forgotten. Or perhaps, in her narcissism, she had simply chosen to ignore it, believing that biology trumped contract law. I picked up the primary document, the deed of trust and promissory note assignment. When I had paid off the mortgage last year, I hadn't written a personal check to my parents. I wasn't that naive. I knew their spending habits. I knew that if I gave them cash, it would vanish into vacations and investments that Harvey suggested. So I had approached the bank directly. I purchased the debt. Technically, the bank had been paid in full, so the monthly letters to my parents stopped. But legally, the lien hadn't been extinguished. It had been assigned. I ran my finger over the signatures on the bottom of page 12. Patricia J. Miller, David L. Miller. They had signed it. I remembered the day clearly. We were in Uncle Robert's conference room. Patricia had been fluttering around, talking about how relieved she was that the bank was off their backs. She hadn't read a single word of what she was signing. She just saw paid in full on the bank's payoff letter and assumed the rest was just lawyer mumbo-jumbo to formalize my gift. But it wasn't mumbo-jumbo. I flipped to Clause 7, alienation of property. The borrowers Patricia and David Miller shall not sell, transfer, gift, or otherwise dispose. E of the property without the express written consent of the note holder, the Amelia Miller Revocable Trust. Any attempt to transfer title without said consent constitutes an immediate default, triggering the acceleration clause, whereby the full principal of $700,000 becomes due and payable immediately. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile touching my lips. They thought the house was a free asset. They thought it was a clean slate to hand to Harvey, but the house wasn't free. It was shackled, and I held the key. I needed to confirm one last thing. I pulled up the county clerk's public records on my laptop. I searched the address. Owner of record, David and Patricia Miller. Lien holder, the Amelia Miller Revocable Trust. It was still there, black and white, public record. If they tried to sign a quitclaim deed to Harvey on Sunday, the title company, if they even used one, would flag it immediately. But knowing my mother, she was probably trying to do a kitchen table transfer. Just signing the back of the deed and handing it to him, bypassing the legal checks to save money. That was dangerous, for them. I closed the file. My sadness was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a prosecutor building a homicide case. They wanted to erase me? Fine. I would remind them that ink lasts longer than blood. I took the file, placed it in my briefcase, and walked out. I had one stop to make before Sunday. I needed to see the man who had notarized these signatures. Uncle Robert's office was in the suburbs, a small, converted bungalow sandwiched between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner. It smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish, a scent that used to comfort me when I was a child playing in his waiting room while my parents argued in his office. It was Friday afternoon. I hadn't called ahead. When I walked in, the receptionist, a kindly older woman named Martha, looked up with a start. "Amelia, my goodness, we weren't expecting you. Your mother said you were, well, she said you were ill." "I made a miraculous recovery, Martha," I said, breezing past her desk. "Is he in?" "He's with a client, but—" "I'm family," I said, pushing open the heavy oak door to his inner sanctum. Uncle Robert was sitting behind his desk, looking frazzled. His tie was loosened, and his desk was covered in ribbon-tied documents. He looked up, his eyes widening behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Amelia," he stood up, looking nervously at the door. I thought you weren't coming this weekend." "That's the narrative, isn't it?" I closed the door behind me and locked it. "Sit down, Robert." He sat, sinking slightly into his leather chair. He looked older than I remembered. "Amelia, look, I know you're upset about the house. Your mother told me you took it hard. But you have to understand, they just want to give Harvey a start. You're doing so well and—" "Stop," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I just dropped the heavy estate, P&H file onto his desk. It landed with a loud thwack that made him flinch. "What is this?" he asked, eyeing the folder. "Open it." Robert reached out with a trembling hand and flipped open the cover. He saw the promissory note immediately. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the text. "I know this," he said, confused. "This is the paperwork from last year, when you paid off the bank. Read the assignment of lien, Robert. Read Clause 7. He flipped the pages, his eyes scanning the legal boilerplate. I watched his face. I watched the moment the blood drained out of it, leaving him a pale, ashy gray. He stopped breathing for a second. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh no." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with sudden panic. "Amelia, this creates a secured interest. You didn't just pay it off. You became the bank." "I became the bank," I confirmed, leaning my hands on his desk, looming over him. "And you notarized it. You explained it to them, didn't you, Robert? You told them that the debt was moving from Wells Fargo to the trust." I did," he stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. But Patricia, she was so focused on the monthly payments stopping. She kept saying, "It's all in the family, it's just paper." I thought, honestly, Amelia, I thought you would just forgive the note eventually. I thought it was a formality for tax purposes. "It was a formality to protect my investment," I said. "Now, tell me about Sunday. Mom says you're handling the transfer to Harvey." Robert slumped, burying his face in his hands. "She wants me to draft a gift deed. She wants to transfer the title to Harvey free and clear. She told me you had agreed to release the lien. She said you guys talked on Monday and you gave your blessing." "She lied," I said flatly. Robert groaned. "I prepared the papers, Amelia. They're sitting right there." He pointed to a crisp stack of documents on the corner of his desk, tied with a celebratory gold ribbon. "If she signs these, and if I notarize." Them knowing that the lien hasn't been released, and if you haven't actually agreed. "Then you are committing fraud, Robert," I finished for him. "And since I am a forensic accountant who specializes in asset recovery, I would be forced to report that fraud. You would lose your license. You would lose your practice." He went completely silent. The color that had left his face didn't return. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a landmine. I can't do the transfer," he whispered. "I have to call her. I have to tell her we can't do it." He reached for the phone. "No," I said, placing my hand over his. He looked up, confused. "What? Amelia, if I don't warn her, she's going to announce it to everyone. She's invited 50 people. The neighbors, the club members, Harvey's friends." "Exactly," I said. "She wants a show. She wants a big, grand gesture where she plays the benevolent queen and crowns her prince. If you call her now, she'll just spin it. She'll lie to the guests. She'll say I'm blocking it out of spite. She'll make me the villain in private." I picked up the gold-ribbon documents, the fraudulent gift deed, and held them up. "You are going to go to that party, Robert. You are going to bring these papers. And when the moment comes to sign, you are going to ask me if I have any objections." "But you're not invited," he said weakly. "Oh, I'll be there," I said, a dark promise in my voice. "I own the place, remember? I don't need an invitation to inspect my own property." "Amelia, please," Robert begged, his voice cracking. "This is going to destroy them. If you do this in front of everyone, Harvey will be humiliated. Patricia will never forgive you." "They tried to steal $750,000 from me, Robert," I said, turning to leave. "And they tried to erase me from my own family. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm looking for a return on my investment." Saturday was an exercise in psychological warfare. I stayed in my apartment, but I was everywhere. I had alerts set up on my phone for any digital movement from Harvey or my mother. At 10:00 a.m., a notification popped up from a local marketplace app. Listing vintage mahogany executive desk, solid wood, great condition, $50, must go today. I clicked the image. It was my desk. The desk I had bought with my first paycheck as a junior auditor. The desk I had left in my room, the guest wing, because it was too heavy to move to my apartment immediately. Harvey was selling it for $50. I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, I could see piles of garbage bags, black bags filled with clothes, my high school yearbooks, the debate trophies I had won. He wasn't just moving in, he was purging. He was scrubbing the house of any evidence that I had ever lived there. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me, but I forced it down. I needed that anger cold. I needed it sharp. I had a friend, reckless but loyal, named Jason, who lived near my parents. I texted him the link. "Me, buy this, don't negotiate, go pick it up now, tell me what you see." An hour later, Jason sent me a photo. The desk was in the back of his truck. Jason got it. Dude selling it is a piece of work. He was laughing, said he was clearing out junk to make room for his empire. Also, there's a massive tent being set up in the backyard. Looks expensive. Caterers are already there. Me, did he say anything else? Jason, yeah, he asked if I wanted to buy a girly bed frame too. Said he's burning the mattress. I put the phone down, burning the mattress. The phone rang. It was Uncle Robert. "Amelia," his voice was a hushed whisper. "I'm at the house for the rehearsal dinner. Your mother, she's out of control." "Stick to the script, Robert." "She's telling everyone," he hissed. "She's telling the caterers, the neighbors. She's saying, my daughter Amelia couldn't be here. She's so busy with work, but she's so happy for her brother." "She's lying to their faces, Amelia. She's building this perfect fantasy." "Let her build it," I said, staring at the wall. "The higher she builds it, the harder it falls." "Harvey is difficult," Robert continued. "He's treating the house like he already owns it. He ordered contractors to start demolition on the east wall on Monday morning. Amelia, if they knock down that wall." "They won't," I said. "Monday isn't going to happen for them." "I don't know if I can do this," Robert said. "I'm your father's brother. This is going to tear the family apart." "The family is already torn, Robert. They tore it when they decided my sacrifice was Harvey's birthright. You have a choice. You can stand with the law or you can stand with the liars. But if you stand with them, you go down with them." He was silent for a long moment. "I'll see you tomorrow," he whispered and hung up. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I didn't sleep. I laid out my clothes for the next day. I chose a sharp, charcoal gray suit, my court armor, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back tight. I packed my briefcase. The original promissory note. The deed of trust. The printed text, messages from Harvey. The marketplace listing for my desk. A formal notice of eviction, drafted and notarized that afternoon. I wasn't just going to a party. I was going to an execution. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Perfect party weather, Patricia would be saying. At 1:00 p.m., I got into my car. The drive to the suburbs took 40 minutes. As I turned onto the familiar street, lined with oak trees and manicured lawns, my heart rate remained steady. I saw the house, my house. It looked beautiful. Balloons in silver and gold, Harvey's university colors were tied to the mailbox. Cars lined the street. I could hear music, a tasteful jazz band playing in the backyard. I parked directly in front of the driveway, blocking in a catering van. A valet attendant rushed over. "Miss, you can't park here. This is a private eve." I stepped out of the car, slamming the door. I adjusted my blazer, picked up my briefcase, and looked him in the eye. "I'm not a guest," I said, walking past him toward the front door. "I'm the landlord." I walked through the front door of the house I had paid for, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't the scent of home, old books, and vanilla candles that I remembered. It was the smell of expensive, catered food, truffle oil, roasting meat, and the cloying sweetness of fresh lilies. The hallway was crowded with people I vaguely recognized. Neighbors from down the street, a few of my parents, church friends, and a swarm of young people in suits and cocktail dresses, Harvey's network. They were laughing, holding flutes of champagne, oblivious to the fact that they were standing in a war zone. I moved through them like a ghost. No one stopped me. I think my expression, cold, fixed, and utterly unsmiling, acted as a shield. I walked past the living room and glanced in. The furniture had been rearranged. My father's favorite recliner was gone, replaced by a sleek modern leather chair that looked uncomfortable and pretentious. A large portrait of Harvey, wearing his graduation cap and gown, had been mounted above the fireplace, replacing the family photo that had hung there for 20 years. I felt a physical pang in my chest, a sharp twist of grief for the family that had effectively died the moment that portrait went up, but I pushed it down. Grief was for later. Now I needed leverage. I followed the sound of applause to the French doors leading to the backyard. The scene outside was picturesque. A white tent had been erected on the lawn. Round tables with white linens were scattered around. A small stage had been set up near the rose garden, the garden I had paid a landscaper to restore for Mom's 60th birthday. On the stage stood Patricia, Harvey, and my father. Dad looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clutching a glass of water. Harvey looked triumphant, his chest puffed out, basking in the attention. Patricia was holding a microphone, her face flushed with the intoxication of being the center of attention. Uncle Robert was standing to the side of the stage, near a small podium holding the ribbon-tied documents. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, his eyes darting around the crowd. I stepped out onto the patio, staying in the shadows of the awning for a moment. I wanted to hear the speech. "And we just couldn't be prouder," Patricia was saying, her voice amplified by the speakers. "Harvey has worked so hard to get his degree. He has such a brilliant mind for business. And David and I realized that the greatest gift we could give him wasn't just a pat on the back. It was a foundation, a legacy." The crowd murmured appreciatively. "We want him to start his life without burdens," she continued, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion. "We want him to have the freedom to build his empire. So, today, we are officially signing over the deed to this house to our son, Harvey." Applause erupted. Harvey beamed, waving to the crowd like a politician. "Now," Patricia added, "I know many of you have asked about Amelia. She sends her love, of course. She's terribly busy with a big case in the city and couldn't get away. She's heartbroken to miss this, but she told me, 'Mom, give Harvey the house. He deserves it more than anyone.'" A low, angry hum started in my ears. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. She had erased my sacrifice and replaced it with her own benevolence, using my name to validate her theft. The applause died down. Patricia turned to Uncle Robert. "Robert, bring the papers over. Let's make this official." Robert didn't move. He stared at the documents, then he looked up and locked eyes with me across the lawn. He went pale. I stepped out of the S. Haddos, my heels clicked loudly on the stone pavers, a sharp, rhythmic sound that seemed to cut through the murmuring crowd. I walked straight down the center aisle of the grass, parting the guests like the Red Sea. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone, "I don't remember saying that." The silence that fell over the backyard was instant and absolute. The jazz band stopped playing mid-note. 50 heads turned in unison. Patricia froze on stage. Her smile faltered, twitching at the corners. "Amelia, what are you doing here? I thought you were sick." I didn't stop walking until I was standing right at the foot of the stage. I looked up at them, my family, looming over me. "I made a recovery," I said. "And I decided I couldn't miss such a historic moment. You were just telling everyone how I gifted the house to Harvey. Please, continue. I'd love to hear the rest of that fairy tale." Harvey stepped forward, grabbing the microphone from our mother. His face was twisting into a sneer. "Jesus, Amelia, can you not make everything about you for once? You're not invited. Security is their security." "There is no security, Harvey," I said calmly. "Just neighbors and family, and a very nervous lawyer." I turned to Uncle Robert. He was shaking. "Robert," I said, my voice sharp, "my mother just announced that she is transferring the title of this property to Harvey. You prepared the gift deed, correct?" I did, Robert stammered, his voice barely audible. And as the notary and the family attorney, I continued, raising my voice so the back row could hear, did you inform them of the legal status of the property? Did you tell them about the lien? Lien, Harvey laughed, a harsh barking sound. There's no lien, the mortgage is paid off, you paid it, it's gone. Is it? I asked. I lifted my briefcase and set it on the table where the cake was displayed. I clicked the latches open, click, click, the sound echoing in the silence. I pulled out the file. Mom, Dad, Harvey, you seem to be confused about the nature of the transaction that occurred last year. I held up the promissory note. I didn't pay off the mortgage as a gift. I purchased the debt from the bank. I am the note holder. I am the lien holder. And according to this legal document, which Mom and Dad signed. I walked up the stairs of the stage and slapped the document onto the podium next to Robert. Clause 7 states that any attempt to transfer the title without my written consent constitutes an immediate default. Patricia's face had gone from pink to chalk white. She looked at Robert. What is she talking about? Robert, tell her to stop. Tell her it's my house. Robert looked at the ground. She's right, Patricia. The trust holds the mortgage. You can't give the house to Harvey. You don't own it free and clear. Amelia does. A gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw Mrs. Higgins, the next-door neighbor, cover her mouth with her hand. That's a lie, Harvey shouted. He looked like a child whose toy had been snatched away. She's lying. She's just jealous. Mom, sign the papers, just sign them. If she signs those papers, I said, turning to face the crowd, she commits fraud. And the moment that pen lifts from the paper, I will initiate foreclosure proceedings. The acceleration clause will trigger, and the full balance of $700,000 will be due by close of business tomorrow. I looked at my father. He had sunk into a chair, his head in his hands. He knew. Deep down, he had always known I wouldn't just throw money away. You wouldn't, Patricia whispered. She wasn't performing anymore. She was terrified. We're your parents, you wouldn't foreclose on us. I wouldn't foreclose on my parents, I agreed. But I will absolutely foreclose on a pair of tenants who try to steal my asset to give it to a squatter. I turned to Harvey, and you. I pulled the second document from my briefcase, the eviction notice. You mentioned you were turning the guest wing into an office. I saw the listing for my desk. You sold my property. It was junk, Harvey spat. I'm improving the place. You are damaging the collateral, I corrected. And since you are not on the lease, and you are certainly not the owner, you are trespassing. I handed the notice to him. He didn't take it, so I let it drop to the floor at his feet. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, I said. If you are still here tomorrow at noon, I will have the sheriff remove you. And since I'm feeling generous, I won't press charges for the theft of my furniture. Yet. UB*TCH, Harvey screamed. He lunged toward me, his fist raised. The crowd screamed. My father jumped up and grabbed Harvey's arm, holding him back. Stop it, Dad yelled, finding his voice for the first time in decades. Harvey, stop, it's over. Harvey struggled, his face purple with rage. It's my house, she stole it, she's our. Ruining my life. I didn't ruin your life, Harvey, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper that only they could hear. I paid for it, for 10 years, and today I stopped paying. I turned to the guests. They were staring at us with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was the gossip of the century. Patricia's reputation as the perfect matriarch was disintegrating in real time. I apologize for the interruption, I said to the crowd. Please enjoy the champagne. I paid for that too. I walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I could hear Patricia sobbing, a high, keening wail that sounded less like heartbreak and more like the screech of a losing gambler. The fallout was swift and brutal. I didn't stay for the rest of the party, obviously. I went to a diner a few miles away, ordered a black coffee, and waited. My phone blew up with texts and calls from extended family members, some calling me a monster, others, the ones who had always secretly disliked Patricia's snobbery, sending quiet messages of support. Uncle Robert met me there an hour later. He looked 10 years older. He sat down in the booth opposite me and ordered a whiskey neat. "They cleared out," he said. "The party ended about 5 minutes after you left. Harvey tried to keep the music going, but people were just fleeing. It was excruciating." "Did they sign the deed?" I asked. "No," Robert shook his head. "Patricia tried. She actually picked up the pen, but David took it out of her hand. He told her if she signed it, he'd divorce her." I raised an eyebrow. Dad grew a spine. That's a plot twist I didn't see coming. "He's humiliated, Amelia. He knew about the arrangement with the trust, but he let Patricia bully him into thinking you wouldn't enforce it. When you walked out there, I think he finally saw Harvey for what he is. A parasite." "And Harvey?" "He's gone," Robert said. "He smashed a few vases, screamed that we were all toxic, and drove off. I think he's staying with a friend." "Good," I said. "Make sure the locks are changed tomorrow." The next few weeks were a legal and emotional grind, but I didn't waver. I couldn't. I enforced the terms of the trust. I didn't kick my parents out, but I restructured their reality. We sat down, me, them, and 2 lawyers, and drafted a formal lease agreement. They were allowed to live in the house as life tenants, provided they paid the property taxes, insurance, and utilities. If they missed a payment, or if they allowed Harvey to move back in for more than 3 consecutive nights, the lease would be terminated, and the house would be sold. The meeting was cold. Patricia refused to look at me. She sat with her arms crossed, staring at the wall, radiating pure hatred. She had lost her power, her favorite son's inheritance, and her social standing in one afternoon. To her, I was the villain. "I hope you're happy," she spat at me as she signed the lease. "You have your house, you have your money, and you have no family." "I have security," I replied, gathering my papers. "And I have the truth. That's enough for me." Harvey didn't fare well. Without the house to anchor his empire, and without the parents' credit cards, which I forced Dad to cancel as part of their financial restructuring, his business evaporated. I heard through the grapevine that he was working as a junior sales rep for a car dealership in the next town over, living in a studio apartment. It was a humble start, one he should have had 5 years ago. Maybe it would make a man out of him. Maybe not. That wasn't my problem anymore. 6 months later, I visited the house for an inspection. It was quiet. The guest wing wall was still intact. My desk was gone, but the room was clean. I found my father in the garden. He was pruning the roses. He looked tired, but calmer than I had seen him in years. The frantic energy of trying to keep up with Patricia's demands was gone. They were living within their means now, forced into a budget by the strict terms of our contract. "Amelia," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't hug me. We weren't that kind of family anymore, but he looked me in the eye. Is Harvey asking for money?" I asked. "He calls," Dad nodded. "Your mother tries to send him cash from the grocery budget, but there's not much to send. He's learning to stand on his own." "Good." "You did the right thing," Dad said softly. It was the first time he had acknowledged it. "It was cruel, what we tried to do. I'm sorry I let it happen." "Thank you, Dad," I said. It wasn't a full reconciliation. The scars were too deep. I would never trust them with my heart again. But I could trust them with a contract. And in a world of shifting loyalties, a signed document was a kind of peace. I drove back to the city that evening as the sun was setting. I thought about the graduation party. I thought about the look on Harvey's face when the eviction notice hit his shoes. It had been a nightmare. For them, yes. But as I watched the skyline approach, glittering with lights, I realized I had woken up from my own nightmare. I was no longer the bank. I was no longer the martyr. I was just Amelia. And for the first time in my life, I was free.